Hey everybody, Mrs. Harshey here, coming to you live and in person from the comfort of my home, and hoping that you are all safe and sound and locked into your homes. Um, but I am giving you a little bit of information, notes, details from chapter 18 of Dracula. If you remember, I kind of keep telling you this is the most important chapter. It is because of this part that we're going to go over today. So I thought that we would do a little bit of a hybrid kind of reading and note taking at the same time, and this is something that you can keep for later. I'm doing this with the intention that we're going to be back in school and we'll finish up the book, and then you will be ready for a test, a paper at the end of this. And so these are going to be those really important notes and details that are going to show up on a test somewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and give these to you now, and hopefully you can spend some of your quarantine time going over this and reading the book along with me, and that will save you a lot of homework time when we get back in school, and kind of keep it fresh in your mind rather than having to go back and remember it all later. So what I'm doing today is reading from page 263. We were kind of in the middle of chapter 18. We got just a few pages in with the last video. And this is where the group that we have sit down and have a meeting. And I'm trying not to totally associate it with everything that's going on today, but I can't help it. This makes me think about like all the press conferences that we're watching. Like every day you've got President Trump and our governor, other governors hosting these press conferences where they just sit down and say, like, here's what we know about COVID-19 and here's what we're planning to do about it and here's what we need. That's exactly what they're doing in this chapter. They like sit down and like the one guy who knows the most is disseminating information to everybody else, and they're coming together to like, how can we attack this thing? In their world, this thing is this vampire that he knows about, that Dr. Van Helsing knows is a vampire. In our world, it's a disease. They're really similar. Like when we were talking about metaphor, man, this is just kind of smacking us in the face now, this metaphor. So, all right, top of page 213, you see Mina Harker's journal, and Mina's writing down these details about the meeting. 30th September. When we met in Dr. Seward's study 2 hours after dinner, which had been at 6 o'clock, we unconsciously formed a sort of board or committee. Professor Van Helsing took the head of the table, to which Dr. Seward motioned him as he came into the room. He made me sit next to him on his right and asked me to act as secretary. That makes sense, right? Because she's the note taker. She kind of has been all along. She knows how to do the shorthand and the typing, etc. Also, because she's a woman. Right? That's typically the way things were done. Keep coming back to that idea. Jonathan sat next to me. Opposite us were Lord Godalming, Dr. Seward, and Mr. Morris. Lord Godalming being next to the professor and Dr. Seward in the center. The professor said, I may, I suppose, take it that we are all acquainted with the facts that are in these papers. We all expressed assent, and he went on. Now, those are the papers that, he had said before, wow, it's so great that Mina wrote all this down because now we can review it. And so that's what they had done. They'd all read through everything that's happened up to this point, kind of like we have done. We've read everything chapter 1 through 17. That's what they sat down and read. Okay, this is all the information we have. Now, where do they go from here? Then it were, I think, good that I tell you something of the kind of enemy with which we have to deal. I shall then make known to you something of the history of this man, which has been ascertained for me. So we then can discuss how we shall act, and can take our measure according. There are such beings as vampires. Some of us have evidence that they exist. Okay, that's a big like whammy statement, right? Like this is happening. This is real. So I grabbed that as the like opening quote here, because this is huge. This is a pivotal point in the book. If you think about the book as being one of those triangles of like rising action to climax, I guess this wouldn't be the climax yet, but it's a pivotal stop in the rising action. Like, boom, this is happening. And now he's going to go on and give us some evidence to back up that claim. Even had we not the proof of our own unhappy experience, the teachings and the records of the past give proof enough for sane peoples. I admit that at the first I was skeptic, were it not that through long years I have trained myself to keep an open mind, I could not have believed until such time as that fact thunder on my ear. See, I prove. Alas, had I known at the first what I know now, nay, had I ever guessed at him, one so precious life had been spared to many of us who did love her. He's referring to Lucy here, right? Their own unhappy experience with the vampire is that they've all lost somebody they love, Lucy. But that is gone, and we must so work that other poor souls perish not, whilst we can save. And now he's going to give them the rundown of what a vampire is. Remember, it's all brand new information to them. It's also brand new information to Stoker's 19th century audience. It's not to us. We just watched some of these details play out in the episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer that we watched. If you've seen Twilight, if you have read any other vampire literature, you know some of these traits. You know that sometimes they're different depending on the book and the author or the creator of the story. That's great. That's part of fiction. We can be flexible. But in Stoker's day and inside the fiction that we're reading, this is brand new information. So we're going to run down the traits of the vampire as told to us by Dr. Van Helsing. The Nosferatu do not die like the bee when he sting once. He is only stronger, and being stronger have yet more power to work evil. This vampire which is amongst us is of himself so strong in person as 20 men. He is of cunning more than mortal, for his cunning be the growth of ages. He have still the aids of necromancy, which is, as his etymology imply, the divination by the dead, and all the dead that he can come nigh to are for him to command. He is brute, and more than brute. He is devil and callous, and the heart of him is not. He can, within limitations, appear at will, when and where, and in any of the forms that are to him. He can, within his range, direct the elements, the storm, the fog, the thunder. He can command all the meaner things, the rat and the owl and the bat, the moth and the fox and the wolf. He can grow and become small, and he can at times vanish and become unknown. So I hope as we're listing these, you're thinking about things that have happened in the book that we've seen him do already. We definitely saw him control the elements when we read the report from the newspaper about the ship that arrived and it seemed to have a storm all around it. That's because he can do that. He can kind of cover himself with that. You can see where that would work to his advantage. As well as all these other things that we've seen him do, like control animals, etc. How then are we to begin our strife to destroy him? How shall we find his where? And having found it, how can we destroy? My friends, this is much. It is a terrible task that we undertake, and there may be consequences to make the brave shudder. For if we fail in this our fight, he must surely win. And then where end we? Life is nothing's. I heed him not. But to fail here is not mere life or death. It is that we become as him, that we henceforward become foul things of the night like him, without heart or conscience, preying on the bodies and the souls of those we love best. To us forever are the gates of heaven shut, for who shall open them to us again? We go on for all time, abhorred by all, a blot on the face of God's sunshine, an arrow in the side of him who died for man. But we are face to face with duty, and in such case must we shrink? For me, I say no. But then I am old, and life with his sunshine, his fair places, his song of birds, his music, and his love lie far behind. You others are young. Some have seen sorrow, but there are fair days yet in store. What say you? So he's kind of laid it out like this is a scary enemy. Who's with me? Like he's giving them the chance to say, oh no, I'm not taking this on. So who's going to say yes? That's his question. And remember, this is still Mina taking notes, so this is going to switch back to her speaking now. Whilst he was speaking, Jonathan had taken my hand. I feared oh so much that the appalling nature of our danger was overcoming him when I saw his hand stretch out, but it was life to me to feel its touch, so strong, so self-reliant, so resolute. A brave man's hand can speak for itself. It does not even need a woman's love to hear its music. When the professor had done speaking, my husband looked into my eyes, and I in his. There was no need for speaking between us. I answer for Mina and myself, he said. Count me in, Professor, said Mr. Quincy Morris, laconically as usual. I am with you, said Lord Godalming, for Lucy's sake, if for no other reason. Dr. Seward simply nodded. The professor stood up and, after laying his golden crucifix on the table, held out his hand on either side. I took his right hand, and Lord Godalming his left. Jonathan held my right with his left and stretched across to Mr. Morris, so as we all took hands, our solemn compact was made. I felt my heart icy cold, but it did not even occur to me to draw back. We resumed our places, and Dr. Van Helsing went on with a sort of cheerfulness which showed that the serious work had begun. It was to be taken as gravely, and in a business-like a way, as any other transaction of life. Well, you know what we have to contend against, but we too are not without strength. We have on our side power of combination, a power denied to the vampire kind. We have sources of science. We are free to act and think, and the hours of the day and the night are ours equally. In fact, so far as our powers extend, they are unfettered, and we are free to use them. We have self-devotion in a cause, and an end to achieve which is not a selfish one. These things are much. Now let us see how far the general powers arrayed against us are restrict, and how the individual cannot. In fine, let us consider the limitations of the vampire in general, and of this one in particular. All we have to go upon are traditions and superstitions. These do not at the first appear much, when the matter is one of life and death, nay, of more than either life or death. Yet must we be satisfied? In the first place, because we have to be. No other means is at our control. And secondly, because after all, these things, tradition and superstition, are everything. And remember, we've talked a lot about how Jonathan and others rejected the superstitions of the vampire and put themselves at risk by doing so, because they just would not open their minds to something different than what they already knew. So on one hand, like they're saying, hey, we've got science on our side. That's a benefit for us. Like we can work out how to defeat this vampire. On the other hand, it's almost their Achilles heel because they won't listen to the superstition. So this is Dr. Van Helsing making an appeal. And if you remember your logos, ethos, and pathos from last year, he's making a logical appeal. He's taking something that would normally be pathos, would be emotion, and trading it into something that's logical. And he's saying, look, we have to look at superstition because it's the only thing we have to go on. That's the only record there is of these vampires. So he gets them on his side and says, like, you know, let's look into this and we'll figure out how to defeat this vampire. So he goes on, does not the belief in vampires rest for others, though not, alas, for us, on them, on superstitions? A year ago, which of us would have received such a possibility in the midst of our scientific, skeptical, matter-of-fact 19th century? We even scouted a belief that we saw justified under our very eyes. Take it, then, that the vampire and the belief in his limitations and his cure rest for the moment on the same base. For let me tell you, he is known everywhere that men have been. In old Greece, in old Rome, he flourished in Germany all over, in France, in India, even in the Cheronese, and in China. So far from us in all ways, there even he is, and the peoples fear him at this day. He have followed the wake of the Berserker Icelander, the devil-begotten Hun, the Slav, the Saxon, the Magyar. So far, then, we have all we may act upon. And let me tell you that very much of the beliefs are justified by what we have seen in our own so unhappy experience. The vampire live on, and cannot die by mere passing of time. He can flourish when he can fatten on the blood of the living. Even more, we have seen amongst us that he can even grow younger, that his vital faculties themselves, with his special pabulum, that means his nourishment, his food, is plenty. But he cannot flourish without this diet. He cannot eat as others. Even friend Jonathan, who lived with him for weeks, did never see him to eat, never. He throws no shadow. He make in the mirror no reflect, as again Jonathan observe. He has the strength of many of his hand. Witness again Jonathan when he shut the door against the wolves, and when he help him from the diligence too. He can transform himself into a wolf, as we gather from the ship arrival in Whitby, when he tear open the dog. He can be as bat, as Madam Mina saw him on the window at Whitby, and as friend John saw him fly around from this so near house, and as my friend Quincy saw him at the window of Miss Lucy. He can come in mist, which he create. That noble ship's captain proved him of this. But from what we know, the distance he can make this mist is limited, and it can only be round himself. He come on moonlight rays as elemental dust, as again Jonathan saw those sisters in the castle of Dracula. We talked about that a little bit in that chapter. That was chapter 4, and you were doing the 4 square activity. And people noted, like, what's this comment about dust? There's this, like, dust or glittering in the air. What is that? Now we know. Now he's telling us that was Dracula. He was there. He was seeing that. That's how he was able to come in and tell those girls, those weird sisters, stop, Jonathan is mine. That dust was him. He became so small. We ourselves saw Miss Lucy, ere she was at peace, slip through a hair-breadth space at the tomb door. He can, when once he find his way, come out from anything or into anything, no matter how close it be bound, or even fused up with fire, solder, you call it. He can see in the dark. No small power this is in a world which is one half shut from the light. Ah, but hear me through. He can do all these things, yet he is not free. Nay, he is even more prisoner than the slave of the galley, than the madman in his cell. He cannot go where he list. He who is not of nature has yet to obey some of nature's laws. Why, we know not. So I'm going to move this screen here to the limitations of the vampire. And this is setting up the path for like how we can defeat him. He may not enter anywhere at first, unless there be someone of the household who bid him to come, though afterwards he can come as he please. His power ceases, as does that of all evil things, at the coming of the day. Only at certain times can he have limited freedom. If he be not at the place whither he is bound, he can only change himself at noon, or at exact sunrise or sunset. These things we are told, and in this record of ours we have proof by inference. Thus, whereas he can do as he will within his limit, when he have his earth home, his coffin home, his hell home, the place unhallowed, as we saw when he went to the grave of the suicide at Whitby, still at other time he can only change when the time come. It is said, too, that he can only pass running water at the slack or the flood of the tide. Then there are things which so afflict him that he has no power, as the garlic that we know of. And as for things sacred, as this symbol, my crucifix, that was amongst us even now when we resolve, to them he is nothing. But in their presence he take his place far off and silent with respect. There are others too, which I shall tell you of, lest in our seeking we may need them. The branch of wild rose on his coffin, keep him that he move not from it. A sacred bullet fired into the coffin, kill him so that he be true dead. And as for the stake through him, we know already of its peace, or the cut off head that giveth rest. We have seen it with our eyes. Thus, when we find the habitation of this man that was, we can confine him to his coffin and destroy him if we obey what we know. But he is clever. Okay. So I'm going to pause this recording here because I've actually already read the next parts of the chapter, and I'm just going to upload those as readings to YouTube so that you can follow along there. So keep these notes and hold on to them, and this is a really good thing to do as we're going forward in the book to kind of reflect back on the lore that Stoker has presented here through Dr. Van Helsing of what the vampire is. All right, hope you're all doing well. I'm going to sign off for now. I'll be talking to you again soon.